Hi everybody, before we get started with this video, I did want to mention that yes, this is a replacement for This Week with Big C today. The reason why is because I honestly had nothing good to share. We got till I think Thursday evening. I hadn't filmed a single clip. There was nothing worth filming. Nothing interesting happened. Nothing good happened. Nothing, not even bad with drama happened. So rather than literally giving you an episode of a whole lot of nothing, I figured let's just do something different. And as of the day that I'm recording this, which is October 1st, 2021, today is Walt Disney World's 50th anniversary. So I figure instead, let me share my thoughts and some stories of my time working at and going to Walt Disney World for not quite 50 years, I'm not that old, but pretty much my whole life. So let's bring back an old classic. This is Chris Talks. So before we get too invested in what's going on, I did want to mention that I do still work for Walt Disney World. And because of that, I can't go into any details involving too many behind the scenes sort of things, because obviously I still work there and I'd like to keep my job. So I will share some stories of things that have happened, but obviously I can only say so much in terms of certain things. So first thing I want to talk about is the fact that I'm from Orlando originally. I was born at downtown Orlando. And because of that, I've been coming to Disney World for pretty much my whole life. So I've seen so many things come and go. When I first started going to the parks, we only had 3. Animal Kingdom didn't exist until many years later. But I distinctly remember going to Epcot and Magic Kingdom back in the day. We didn't go to studios quite as much because there wasn't as much to do there. Eventually, they added a lot more stuff. But back in the day, there really wasn't much to do besides the Great Movie Ride. And then eventually when they added Tower of Terror, but I didn't like Tower of Terror when it first opened. So I did a lot of cool stuff when I was a kid. And I distinctly remember a lot of the most iconic moments and attractions that not everybody remembers from back in the day. Like, for instance, the infamous bright pink castle cake that they turned Cinderella Castle into for the 25th anniversary. I distinctly remember that. It was very ugly. Definitely the worst decision they made when it comes to decorating the castle. Although the teepee that they put on it for the opening of Stitch's Great Escape was pretty bad too. But I was there for that. I was also there for a lot of the most iconic extinct attractions that people either remember fondly or are just fascinated by. So it's very interesting to go back and look at just some of Disney's past, especially over the last 50 years. Well, of course, Walt Disney World was always designed to be much more than just theme parks. And I mean, it's become that. It's definitely different than how it was originally supposed to be, because they were supposed to be a full-on community built on property. And there kind of is, because they have the Golden Oak neighborhood. Not the same thing, though. But then, of course, Magic Kingdom was just one park. And they were supposed to build way more things, and of course they built 3 more parks in the future, 2 water parks. But it's interesting to compare what Walt Disney World was supposed to be as opposed to what it became. So I figured let's take a look at some of my, not only my favorite memories of the parks growing up, but also some stories of my time working at Disney. So when I was growing up, my 3 favorite attractions were Great Movie Ride, of course, Horizons at Epcot, which I thought was just the coolest dark ride. It gave you visions into the future. It had amazing music. It was very easy to get on because it was most of the time a walk-on. And it just had so many amazing visuals and so much technology involved that I absolutely adored. I still to this day feel Horizons is probably the best dark ride Disney has ever built. Traditional dark ride. Obviously, Rise of Resistance exists, but this was a very different beast. And then my favorite ride was Mr. Toad's Wild Ride, which I mostly fell in love with because growing up, I was obsessed with cars. Obviously, the movie Cars didn't exist back then, but if it did, I would have been obsessed with it for sure. I loved watching NASCAR, even though the only thing I cared about was the cool designs on the cars, and just they were fast and they went around in circles. I remember growing up, I turned the top of a dresser into a whole raceway and made like characters out of NASCARs. It was an interesting experience. I was a very creative kid growing up, I will say, in kind of weird ways, and I guess that kind of has translated to the kinds of stuff I like to do for YouTube and for content. So that's kind of how I became what I am today. Anyway, I love Mr. Toad's Wild Ride. I was absolutely devastated when they announced the closure in 1997. And one of my favorite memories growing up was the final time I rode Mr. Toad's Wild Ride. We had to go ride it right before it closed. I think it was, maybe a month or two before it closed. It was fairly close to when it was closing. And we got stuck in the town square scene. Now, for those who don't remember or never rode the Florida version of Mr. Toad, ours was unique because we had two separate tracks that went into different scenes. There were a couple moments where the two tracks intersected, so you saw different ride vehicles on different tracks passing each other, but for the most part they were kind of doing their own things, and then they exited on opposite sides of the building before unloading, loading, and then going back into Toad Hall. One of those scenes where the two vehicles intersected was the town square. So we were stuck on one side of the track, and there was another vehicle that was on the other track stuck like right across from us. So we were stuck for probably a good 20 minutes or so. And of course I was a kid, so I was super impatient. But we decided to strike up a conversation with the family across from us, like just talking about, this is kind of weird, this is interesting, what we were about. It was a good time. Hadn't really been stuck on a ride that long before. I did think we were going to get evac, didn't. They got the ride running again, but we heard lots of spilling, of course, from the cast member, and I think a cast member even walked out there and told us hey, just hang out, we're gonna get going soon. Then the ride did get resumed, and the iconic moment was we emerged from hell into the load station, and the entire queue applauded. It was mostly because they were excited the ride was running again, but I thought that was for me. And it was kind of a cool moment because that was the last time I was ever going to ride that ride. So it was kind of an iconic thing to be like, oh, the last time I ever ride it, we leave for the final time and everybody applauds when we come out. Super great. So I'll always treasure that. I don't remember my last time riding Horizons. I think it was back in the 90s when they reopened it during the ongoing closures of Test Track and Universe of Energy, but obviously Horizons meant a lot to me too, and I was very sad when they closed that down as well. I also distinctly remember some other iconic attractions that no longer exist, including Extraterrestrial Alien Encounter. I only did that once. Now, some of you may know, maybe not everybody, but some of you may know, I'm not a big horror person at all. I wouldn't say I've developed a taste for it, but I don't dislike it as much as I used to, mostly because I've been going to Halloween Horror Nights for several years now, and I kind of enjoy elements of it. I don't like gore, like extreme amounts of gore, and I don't like jump scares, but I like Halloween Horror Nights, so I don't say I hate horror movies anymore. I'll watch them if they have a interesting enough concept or, just look cool, but it's not a genre I'm going to immediately go after. But anyway, I did do Extraterrestrial Alien Encounter once and hated it. Mostly because I thought it was in the dark. Most of the attraction was in the dark. It was loud. It felt like a horror movie. I wasn't really scared. It was more so just irritating to me that we're just sitting in this room in the dark. We have this restraint on our shoulders. There's lots of weird noises and they throw water at us and stuff. It just didn't appeal to me really. And I get why people really do like that attraction. It was definitely something different for Disney, that's for sure. They've never done a horror-based attraction quite like that, and they never will again, because obviously that was a bit too much for kids. But I did it. I also enjoyed classic Epcot attractions that are no longer around, including Food Rocks, which was one of my all-time favorites. That's kind of the attraction that got me into classic rock as a genre. Of course, pre-test track, I remember the World of Motion, which was another Omnimover dark ride. Back in the day, Epcot had all Omnimover dark rides. Everything was a dark ride. And they were all really good. The original Journey into Imagination was a classic. I absolutely loved that attraction. I also rode Journey into Your Imagination, and that was hot trash. So if you ever think that the current version is bad, look at the version that came before it. It was way worse. So that's fun. Of course, The Wonders of Life, I just think to remember. I enjoyed Body Wars. It wasn't my favorite attraction, but it was usually a walk-on, so I was able to get on it pretty easily. So I enjoyed going on Simulator Ride. And of course, Cranium Command, the precursor to Inside Out, was also a great show. But yeah, all the classic attractions have come and gone over the years. I remember them very fondly. Of course, I'd say the single most devastating closure for me was Great Movie Ride, besides maybe Mr. Toad. Mr. Toad, I was really devastated as a kid, but Great Movie Ride, when it was announced to close, had a profound effect, not only because I worked there for 6 years, but also because it was legitimately a childhood dream of mine to work there. When I was a kid, I talked a lot, and I was obsessed with Disney. So my parents always told me, when you grow up, if you ever work for Disney, you have to do one of two jobs. You either have to be a Jungle Cruise skipper, which I haven't done, or you had to be a tour guide at Great Movie Ride. And I did that. And as soon as I went to studios to open Star Tours and found out it was in the same area as Great Movie Ride, I knew immediately I had to get trained at Great Movie Ride. I was trained there in August of 2011, and it was easily the best job I ever had. I've worked for Disney now for 12 years. I started back in May of 2009 as a college program cast member, and I've worked all 4 parks. I think over 22 attractions, merchandise, transportation, you name it, I've done it. Done a lot of fun stuff. But easily my favorite memory and my favorite location of all time was Great Movie Ride. And I had so many incredible memories there. Not just of the great people I worked with, but also it was just fun. Like every day when I worked at Movie Ride, I just had a good time. Because I got to do spieling and I got to entertain people. And it was something that really resonated with me. So I miss it every day. The reason why I left back in 2016 before it closed was I needed a change. I'm not going to get into any of that drama, but I needed a change. I left. I really wish I didn't, because I would have loved to have been there till the end. I did pick up a shift in 2017, so I can say I did work there till pretty close to the end. But it was just devastating when they announced the closure. So it's sad, and of course I will always fondly remember my time at Great Movie Ride. But I will also say, giving credit where credit is due, I don't hate Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway. I really don't. I think it's a good attraction, and it has its flaws. It's definitely not a replacement for Great Movie Ride. They're completely different rides, but I don't think people should be anti-Railway just because it replaced Movie Ride. They were pretty passionate about making sure that there were plenty of references to Movie Ride in Runaway Railway. They also made the Chinese theater look as good as it's ever looked. So, giving credit what credit is due, I still appreciate the fact that at least they did that. And even though I will always miss Great Movie Ride, I'm glad that people are enjoying Runaway Railway. And there are at least lots of little references and hints and nods to the attraction that preceded it, the Great Movie Ride. One of my favorite Great Movie Ride stories was when I was a gangster, and there's this group of little kids in my front row. And I always used to interact with all the people in the front, because when you're in character, it's fun because you kind of get to play off of people. So I would usually try to be kind of intimidating. So I would look at the little kids and be like, tough guy look, talking my gruff gangster voice, And there's this little kid who was acting real brave. And I'm like, hey, what you looking at, kid? What you looking at? And he's like, oh, I'm not afraid of you. I can take you down. I'm like, oh yeah? It's like, yeah. I don't remember what color belt he was, but he had a belt in karate. It was like one of the basic ones. So I looked at him, and of course I did my tough guy shtick and like kind of scared him a little bit, so he backed off and stayed by his mom. And then his brother behind him looked at me square in the face and was like, oh yeah? Well, I'm invincible. And I'm like, oh yeah? You're invincible? He's like, yeah. I got shot by a bazooka and lived. So of course I immediately responded with, well, I ain't messing with that kid. He got shot by a bazooka and lived. So that was pretty funny. So I enjoyed that. I have all kinds of great movie ride stories that I can tell, but I don't want to make this all about Great Movie Ride because there's a lot more iconic things that have happened over the last several years at Disney. I've worked at all 4 parks. I've worked at what is now Disney Springs. Back when I worked there, it was Downtown Disney. I've worked at the Disney Skyliner. I was on the opening team for that, so I opened that back in 2019. And all 4 parks have kind of a special place in my heart. My first park was Epcot, and Epcot was always my favorite park growing up, mostly because it was the park that we went to the most, but also because it was something different. And no other theme park really has been able to replicate what Epcot has, because it's an interesting combination of being entertaining and educational at the same time, and it just works. I do think, obviously, things have changed a lot over the past several years for Epcot, but I still think that resonates with people, and Epcot just has a very distinct feel about it. So I'm glad that Disney is trying to preserve that, for the most part, with all the stuff they're doing with Epcot. Of course, Epcot's a major focus of the 50th anniversary because they added Remy's Ratatouille Adventure, and they've got a bunch more stuff coming, including Guardians of the Galaxy, Cosmic Rewind, the Journey of Water, and other attractions and stuff coming. So Epcot is going to be a major focus of the next few years, and I'm glad because it needs the help, but I also hope it continues to kind of keep that iconic legacy alive, because Epcot is the park that kind of means the most to me. But I worked at Mission Space when I was there. I actually worked there 2 different times, and both times I got Mission Space. Not my favorite attraction, and of course it did replace Horizons, so that part kind of stings a bit, but I still enjoyed it. It was my first attraction, and I learned a lot from working at that attraction. Plus, those jumpsuits are really comfortable. My second park was Magic Kingdom, and I worked there as a part-timer after my college program ended. I was originally trained at Splash Mountain, and then a few months later, I got trained at Thunder Mountain. So it was my first water ride and my first roller coaster all in one shot. And those attractions were really fun to work. Splash broke down all the time, so I always had to go run around the mountain helping people out of logs or resetting the ride, so that was fun. And then Thunder Mountain, I think I did a couple evacuations when that ride broke down, but that's about it. The Thunder Mountain was fun. They're both rickety old rides. Completely safe, don't get me wrong, but they definitely show their age sometimes. But they're great, and they're iconic, and there's a reason why people love them so much. And I love both of those rides. I think they're super fun, super iconic classics that are always going to be fondly remembered and enjoyed at Magic Kingdom and at Disneyland, because I've ridden the equivalents over there too, and those are fun as well. So that's where I worked at Magic Kingdom. Then I went to Hollywood Studios, where I've spent the vast majority of my working time at Disney. I opened Star Tours back in 2011 when the Adventures Continue opened, and then since then I was trained at everything from Great Movie Ride, the American Idol Experience, for the first time in forever, a Frozen Sing-Along Celebration, Indiana Jones, Epic Stunt Spectacular, Jedi Training Academy, Muppet Vision 3D, parades, fireworks, all kinds of stuff. I did a lot at Studios, and I think out of all the parks, I consider Studios kind of my home, just because I spent so much time there and I got to really get to know that park incredibly well. So even though I've been gone a long time, I consider Studios kind of my home. So I miss it. I hope maybe one day I'll go back, but we'll see. Depends on how things shake up. And then my most recent park is the park I still work at, which is Animal Kingdom. I opened Pandora, and I did work Rivers of Light a couple times. I picked up shifts there. that was an interesting experience. And I work at It's Tough to Be a Bug. So it's been interesting to work in the different parks and kind of get to know each one with their own quirks and personality, because they all have very distinct quirks and personalities. And then of course there was the Skyliner, which was a very different experience as well, because it's not in a park. And I kind of got to know not only transportation life, but also resort life, because we had to integrate with several resorts as well. So it's kind of a weird cross between a number of different things, and I enjoyed that experience as well. So, done a lot of stuff with Disney. It's been fun. I wouldn't trade any of the memories I've made over the years for the world. So, of course, for the 50th anniversary, we all got our fancy smancy iridescent name tags. So here's mine. It is Chris from Orlando, because that's where I'm from, and that is my name. Unfortunately, I'm not able to wear it in Pandora, just the rules. But I have it. It's cool, and you know, when I eventually leave Pandora, hopefully I can wear it at my new location. But we'll see. But yeah, Disney means a lot. I've had so many incredible memories at the parks over the years, and even though a lot of decisions that have been made recently I don't necessarily agree with, the past memories and nostalgia kind of doesn't override all of that, but it's somewhat redeeming. Because obviously, even though I may have problems with what is going on currently with the parks and decisions that are being made, I still remember the good times, and I'm still always going to be curious as to what they're going to do next. So I'm glad I'm not at the parks today, because I know it's going to be an absolute mess being there for the 50th, but I'm glad I can kind of reminisce about some of my favorite moments and the time that I've spent at the parks over the many, many years that I've been going. So anyway, I think that's going to do it for this episode of Chris Talks. I've shared a lot of stuff. Obviously, I have a lot more I could share, but I don't want to make this too long of a video. So thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. This week with Big C. We'll be back next week, assuming I have content to share, which I should. Anyway, new videos on this channel air 3 days a week, so hit that subscribe button and click the notification bell. That way you know when new videos drop. You also might see some bonus videos soon, because I've got a lot of content and I don't want to spread it out too much, so you might see some bonus Saturday videos or extra videos, so be on the lookout for extra content. It's good stuff. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I will see you next time on Chris Talks. Bye-bye.